Hello, everyone, and welcome to Osquery Office Hours. It is December. We're discussing the Olympics and skiing, and moving on to Osquery topics. Announcements and highlights since the last meeting. I don't know that I have any. Anyone else?
Don't think so.
Okay. Next section is sort of an open section for questions, issues, PRs, anything people want to discuss that didn't bubble up into the agenda. I see mostly the usual crowds, so seems unlikely, but consistency,
Yeah.
Okay. Agenda items. Zach, you were proposing we cut a 521 next week. Seems brilliant. Maybe we should just try and work. I was looking last night. We've got a bunch of PRs, several from you. Maybe after all of those are merged, if we get them in by next week, then that's a good.
That was what I was imagining. It was roughly everything from like 8704 up that I was hoping to get in. I'm a little I'm wondering about this changes to pick ETW changes from user history. This one from the freaking mind. I have like a slight suspicion that this was like a LLM suggested to do this, and that there's not really like a good reason for it. But I'm not sure. I asked the question. I if they have a good reason, then I'm happy to get it in, and if they don't, then I think we should probably just reject the PR. If they don't have an answer quickly, I'm fine with just pushing it to the next release. The rest of the PRs that are open sort of above that line, I'd love to see get in. Some of them are mine, maybe almost half. This one from Creatures about the file system traversal from Creatures seems to be from Databricks. Seems very promising, although we just keep getting test failures there in the CI. But it seems promising, the approach. There's a part of me that's wondering, like, why didn't we think of doing this before? Is there a reason why this shouldn't work? Because it just seems awfully sensible. So if anyone has thoughts about that, please feel free to jump in.
So I would normally ask you or Mike that, but my observation from reading a lot of the code that the collective group of us have written across all time is there's a lot of stuff that seems obvious now that we just missed.
Yeah.
The file table was the first table that we wrote. It was the file table and the hash table to exhibit kind of like dynamic file enumeration and binary hashing. So it's possible that this is some of like the oldest, shitest code in Osquery potentially.
Okay. Thanks for remembering that, Mike. Yeah, the approach seems to make a lot of sense to me. It improves both the correctness and the performance, according to their claims. And so it'll be awesome to get that in. And then yeah, we've got some bug fixes and new features. So sounds like there's general agreement to do it. I guess I'm kind of imagining like we cut it around the 10th, and then either we get our reviews done quickly and we sort of release it pre-Christmas, or maybe we just call it stable post-New Year. Either would probably work for me, just depending on how things go.
Yeah. For 8704, I wonder is it in a state where we could just fix it?
Yeah, I'm sure I could just fix it.
Sometimes people don't check the allow maintainers to edit the PR button.
Okay, good question. I imagine that we could just fix it. Let's see, how can we
I have an edit button in the GitHub UI, so we can probably just fix it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so if we I can do that. If the person doesn't come back in the next day or two, I can do that. Then someone else will need to review if I do that, or at least give the final approval.
To you, actually, I think I don't remember how we have it configured. You may actually be able to self-approve.
My memory is that we can't, but if not, it seems like no big deal. I
Yeah,
can do a review and someone else can just give a check mark.
yeah. What other things do we have in here? Let's see. You were unsure of 8716, the DNS resolver.
Yes, this one is like, in my testing, the DNS changes are picked up with the existing code, but a customer of ours is reporting that their DNS changes are not picked up. I could not find a good way to reproduce their situation fully because they're using like a Cisco VPN client and stuff. So I'm asking them if this change fixes it for them. If it does, I think we should merge it. If it doesn't, then I'm not sure what next. But
There may be some discussion merited on 8726. Stefano, this is probably for you to pay attention to. This is Zach's PR to support the login items, which is working by querying, it internally queries the file table. And my memory from you and Teddy is that we are sort of trying to move away from the internal use of queries because it makes it harder to untangle the linked binaries for like testing and stuff.
Yeah, in general, yes. Also, the performance might not be the most ideal, but obviously it depends on the specifics of the table being implemented and what it needs to do. But yeah, it creates dependencies, hardware dependencies between the tables, and especially on like the SQL interface is meant to be really a higher level interface than the tables implementation, and also it creates this bridge between two parts of code that shouldn't really be connected that way and creates issues. But I don't know. I think I saw other PRs going through with that internal connection, and I guess until anyone is interested to do the separation work, I mean, there is obviously it adds additional work to do then, but at the same time, I cannot force anyone to do more work to not do that, and etc. and say that is vital.
Yeah, thank you for that input. In this case, it would be pretty easy to just implement this without calling the SQL. I think I thought it was like, oh, this makes reading the code cleaner, because instead of like 50 lines of file handling code, it's just like writing one query. But if we're desiring not to write the queries, I can definitely switch this over to just writing the file handling code directly in this case. And yeah, I've got a bunch of other places that do it, but sure, if we don't want to proliferate that, then that's fine.
Yeah, Stefano, that was my memory, is it's sort of in the like, it came up a lot when we were talking about how to like reduce the disk space footprint and maybe the build times, especially around the test targets.
Yeah.
But no one has done the work to like remove it everywhere across the code base. So it's just not making the problem worse.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's fine. This is the kind of thing that Cursor is exceptionally good at writing this code. So this will not take much time at all.
Yeah, I mean, it's a couple of file stats, so it should be pretty simple.
Yeah.
Any other PRs here that we feel like we need to talk about? That was the only thing that looked off to me on 8726 from you, Zach.
I see that there's this one from Micah.
Yeah.
I didn't really look very carefully at it yet. Doesn't seem problematic. I think we should definitely try to get it in.
Yeah, Micah found this when we were trying to like noodle. Let me see if he actually explained it in the PR. Yeah, as he said, the MDM distributed certificates, there isn't a way to surface visibility into their trust settings. So he wrote a table.
Yeah, great. And I think I have one more fix that I'll try to get in like today or tomorrow, which will be, what is it? Fixing the last connected time in the Wi-Fi networks table on my phones. And I figured out a way to get that data that we think works.
Neat.
Yeah.
With sort of the advancement of Cursor, I'm wondering if we should pick up the endpoint security work again, because it always seemed like kind of just a big slog to get all of the like stuff plumbed in. And here we have some tools that help with slogs now.
I've been finding Cursor to be like remarkably good at that kind of stuff. And like it for sure needs careful supervision, but it is like things that would be mega painful to do by hand, it can do pretty well as long as you're very carefully looking at what comes out.
Yeah. So I don't know. I was thinking about trying to throw Cursor at the endpoint security stuff at some point in the future.
Do you guys use Claude Code?
I do. Claude Code's a little bit nicer than Cursor, I find, but has like a little bit of a different learning curve. Cursor's like kind of pretty trivial because it looks like an IDE and it kind of just goes. Like I'm not a heavy user, so take this all with a grain of salt. Claude Code feels a little bit better, but like it's like a different modality for me. My employer also pays for one and not the other, so you know.
I think for writing kind of, if you have like a large C++ like initiative to take on, I think something that is more on the agentic side than the like directed side is good, especially for scaffolding out large bits of new code and stuff like that. And then you could always be a bit more surgical maybe with Cursor. But since
modern Cursor is in agentic mode.
Yeah, yeah, it does. That's true. I think it's worth trying. Like, I mean, pros and cons. I think.
Maybe I should try Claude Code because I just like tried Cursor one day and was like, wow, this is working great, and then just ran with it.
Claude Code's nice too.
I've been writing a lot of C++ with Claude Code recently for another project, and it's awesome. It's really good. Like, it's also really good at like playing different personas with you. If you're like, hey, can you like study the C++ 23 standard and like make sure that I'm like writing this idiomatically and like in a modern way, like give me feedback. Like it's a good like code review, like learning the new C++ standards tool as well. We joke at work, like it would be ridiculous to do anything as mundane as writing code by hand anymore, unless you really have to. But if you feel like you're spending more than like, you know, you're writing more than like 10 to 20% of your code by hand, you're almost definitely doing it wrong, I think.
That's been my experience with writing C++ and Cursor for sure.
Nice.
Yeah, VS Code's GitHub Copilot integration has Claude integrated with it. And it's, I've used both the standard one that's available and Claude is leaps and bounds better at doing especially funky code, like Ansible playbooks and those kinds of things. It's impressive how good it is at figuring out and following your existing patterns.
Now it will get off the rails as your context window grows, but yeah,
yeah.
CSS, like if you're like, oh man, I really don't want to write this Terraform, like, oh, amazing, life changing.
Yeah.
Yeah. But man, you have to be careful with these things. They just pump out a lot of stuff and it does not all make sense.
Yeah, the skill is for sure like reading code. But as like, I think like low level software developers, like that is a skill that you have already developed.
I worry for the future generations.
Yeah, yeah. Future generation software developers are fucked, but might as well enjoy it while it lasts.
Okay, I have a question for you, Mike. Maybe Zach too. I don't know. since we are now well and truly off the Osquery topics and into AI land. So one of the things I see in my developers and that I think about in AI is what are we doing as programmers, right? And there's a seminal paper in the 80s called Programming as Theory Building, if you have ever encountered it or not. I would strongly recommend reading it, or at least a blog post summarizing it, or maybe 2 sentences from me, right? But the general gist of the paper is that the point of programming is not exactly the artifact and code that comes out. It is the shared understanding and model of the problem domain. So this is a paper from 1984, right? So, and it's true in other domains. And one of the things that I see that I don't understand yet is when I understand the program, for example, our beloved launcher code base or Osquery, it's fairly easy for me to direct an AI in a way that fits the underlying model and does not just slap band-aids all over it. But it's not clear to me that someone who does not understand the full problem domain has that. And I don't exactly trust the current AIs to understand the problem domain versus kind of be a little bit more tactical, right? Oh, it smells like this here. It probably belongs like this. Whereas they don't necessarily gather full context. So Mike, you apparently only write 20% of your code these days. Like, what's your vibe on that?
I mean, way less than that, I think. But I think so. I mean, I'm really into like AI software engineering as a like field of study from the perspective of like not just like vibing, but how do you get AI systems to produce a lot of very high quality, like well architected code very quickly? And I think that there's a big conversation in this like ecosystem around context engineering, which is kind of like the modern formulation of this like idea that you're saying, which is like you spend all of this time explaining the problem as you understand it to an AI system, and then you generate the code, and then you throw away all of the instruction and context and information. And this would kind of be like writing a bunch of C++ code, compiling it, and then throwing away the C++ and committing the assembly. In a lot of people's minds. So there's a lot
that
of
was exactly what came to mind for me, was like the C to assembly step, and then it's like the step above. But then there's the non-determinism.
Totally, but you could say so, and this is where you know, the stochasticity of life comes in, which is like you could think about like if the production of code from specification and context becomes sufficiently cheap and democratized, then you could see the generation of code as being like this immutable process where instead of like editing code to implement a new feature, you just redefine the context and then regenerate the whole code base or something. And like, yes, the generation is relatively stochastic, but you could say like you don't actually care whether or not the comments look like this or whether or not like this element of the code is exactly like this, but as long as you can sufficiently document your expectations and your like, acceptance criteria, like for most use cases, that's probably fine. And this is all just like philosophy right now, but
we moved like, in philosophy, absolutely.
That's the idea, right?
I feel like the randomness seems reasonable to me, right? Like on Monday I'll write something one way and on Wednesday another way. So I don't know that matters, but I still worry about like the underlying model, and I don't know, maybe it doesn't matter and I'm being sort of some Luddite, but I feel like there's all these sort of deep bits of complexity in big software projects, right? And some of them are magic and powerful, and some of them are just happenstance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess I'm not as convinced as Mike is that the like ultimately the thing that you record is like the set of prompts. I think it might still be that the code is really the outcome, and because the prompting gets us to the more precise definition that is the code. And I think the difference from like C to assembly is like their C to assembly is relatively straight up mapping. Yes, it's possible to do it a few different ways, but either way, like the meaning is pretty clear. But I think prompt to C is like the mapping is much
Not really
clear.
though. Like whether you use Clang or GCC, whether you don't optimize at all, or you have O3 like level optimization, like there's so many things you can do to your compiler configurations, which will change the underlying assembly output in ways that can be pretty substantive. And I'm not saying prompts specifically, it's context. And what is context? You could say, man, that's just a fucking fancy term for prompts. Like you're full of shit. But I think about it as slightly different. It's like specifications, and they can be quite detailed specifications, which include like math. I'm working on something which is like an atmospheric physics project at the moment. There's like lots of math specifications, and then you can also use AI systems to generate like there's all sorts of like, you know, whether it's like a critic or a judge or a validator, like there's different like techniques for then also having AI systems that like validate the correctness of the generation relative to the specification and stuff like that. So do you know what I mean?
So Zach, one thing I want to disagree with a little bit in what you said, ignoring everything Mike is saying, is the general gist of the Programming as Theory building paper is that it's not the code that matters. It's the context behind the code. And you can see this as a practical effect. If all of the original maintainers of something vanish, it can be very hard to pick up development on that project. It can work okay if you have people, if there's like a transition and people sort of get trained up in a sense. But like if you just pick up a software thing, there's so many like, well, why did they do it this way? Does this matter? What was the idea behind it? So that larger context, I think, actually matters more than the code. What I don't understand still about AI, and Mike is definitely not answering my question, and that's okay. We love him anyhow. It's like when I write something, when I think about like some large project, launcher, Osquery, the ones we know, there are choices I make for reasons, sometimes arbitrary and sometimes very considered. And those combine and stack onto each other to make some future product. And I do not trust AI makes those decisions. So it looks at the specifications I've given it and meets them. But is that good enough for something big and complex enough? And maybe it is. I don't know.
I think what you're saying here is like relatively imprecise. And like, is there a fundamental reason why an AI system would not be able to build that perspective if constructed appropriately, or like it was sufficiently intelligent? And like, to what degree is it required to like acquire perspective before executing on some objectives? And what are the ways in which we could acquire perspective? Like, I don't know if I really understand like whether or not there's like a postulation or question here, just that like I know some stuff about my code base and I can, at the moment, like I can produce different code than you can produce with an LLM, and that's probably like a combination of like fluency with the AI systems, as well as like I might be a better Rust programmer than you. So like I can get an LLM to like write better Rust because like I have a perspective on the borrow checker and like the idiomatic ways to like organize Rust code that someone else might not. So like right now, your ability to generate software with AI is a combination of like your ability to generate software and your ability to leverage AI. And you have to, if you can just write software, but you're not very good at AI, you're going to generate shit software. If you can just use AI, but you don't know anything about writing software, you're going to generate shit software. Like you need both and the specific ways that they intertwine. And that's only, I think that will change like over time. You will have to be less of a good software engineer to generate good software, and you will have to be less of a AI engineer to generate good software. But at the moment, they are relatively intertwined. But they're less intertwined now than they were a year and a half ago, and hopefully that will continue and like further democratize the ability to.
And is that because the like AI will get better at sort of leading you through fleshing out your spec in context, if you will?
Yeah, I mean, eventually, at the moment, we're still in the realm of like I'm writing a spec and then using it, and then maybe one day like you'll be able to use AI more to help you generate specs, and then maybe you can one day use AI more to figure out what specs should you generate, and like what are the things that you should build, and then maybe in the future like you won't even interact with the context or the code. It'll be like just like business users kind of like communicating around a boardroom, and then like communicating with like an AI machine that then is responsible for all the software. Like who knows like what like Blade Runner future will live in. But right now I think we're just super early.
So I think a good example of that is I was just generating Ansible code to set up my Mac using AI. I actually just said, take these 12 applications and generate Ansible code for all of them. And it did that. And then I asked it to do another one. And I noticed when I was using the default AI tool for Copilot, it didn't check a bunch of things. But when I switched to Claude went through this entire process of looking at other roles, looking at the README, then based on both of those, it created a role that was much more in line with previous roles that I had done manually and with the README than any of the code with some of the other ones. So I think that points to the AI tools will get better.
But notice also like those are both using the same Anthropic model. So the difference in quality of generation was completely down to like context and prompting. Claude code, the Claude code, the Claude framework has a lot of like built-in knowledge about how to traverse a code base, how to build context, and how to execute that. Ideally, like that would be more baked into the model fundamentally. But yeah, there are a lot of, I think, there's a lot of mileage in that like domain of manipulative control.
Yeah, on the topic about prompting and the context showing up in code, it reminds me of the age-old discussion of the art of comments. If you think about it, one of the things that AI does not do a good job on is commenting why it's being done in a specific way or what the thought is behind it. It instead comments on what the code just does. And that's one of the things that like I'll admit as I'm not classically trained. I'm not trained in programming. I'm not any of that kind of stuff. I've learned mostly organically. And one of the things that the other engineer on my team has really taught me during the past couple of years is, commenting what the code does isn't that important. Commenting why the code does what it does is more important, and what the caveat is that you ran into for why you're doing something that may look weird.
Yeah,
wow.
I mean, the Facebook, like at Facebook, the perspective on comments was always like, comments are a code smell. Like if you comment on what you shouldn't comment on like what the code's doing, because that's clear from the code. You shouldn't, and like your design of the software should be sufficient to document like what the like why it's organized in the way it is, and any like professional software engineer should be able to extract that. So there was almost a culture of like no comments at Facebook. Now I think for sufficiently low level code where you do have these like hard won bits of knowledge that you have to extract from debugging, I think it makes loads of sense. But I think Steph's totally right. Like ultimately there's a lot of shit code out there that these models have been trained on, and it's really like you are a sorcerer and like you have to conjure the code you want, the good code. So you still have to have a perspective on comments and your object-oriented design patterns, and like which of the Scott Myers C++ patterns do you want to use for this? Or you have to know that Scott Myers wrote a book of patterns and that you should ask the AI system to consider the patterns that Scott Myers wrote and consider this like 4,000 line file and figure out how to break it up based on solid principles or something. Like you need to have the language and the perspective, I think, for sure, to get to get stuff out of these AI systems. And that is like the difference between like vibing and like AI software engineering. Guys, I feel bad that we totally like derailed the conversation here. Should we get back to Osquery?
We made it through all of the agenda items. I do have an Osquery item that I thought could come out of this conversation, though. Do we have a stance on AI utilization in Osquery or Osquery code specifically?
Whether or not you should use AI to write code?
As a project, how do we feel about it? I think empirically we are okay with it, but I feel like we should at least say that maybe, right? And I feel like if Zach puts up a PR, I don't actually care if AI wrote it. I'm going to review it and Zach's name is on it, and then mine as a reviewer. And I wonder if there's more we should think about.
My perspective is similar. Like the no one can like offload responsibility to the AI. Like you wrote the code with your tools. At the same time, like we also don't punish people when they introduce like bugs and mistakes into the code. But yeah, I mean, I think that we have to fully own like the products that we're contributing, and so I generally treat any review that I do of someone's work as something that they produced using whichever tools they chose to use for that production.
Now, for web apps, it's a completely different story than it is for like low-level operating system software, where like in Osquery, like the specific lines of code do matter. Whereas in like a Rails app or something, like they really don't. So what a lot of people, and also like if you consider over the past year, 2 years now, like the rate at which people can produce sufficiently democratized code like web apps or mobile apps or React code or whatever, it has grown on the orders of magnitude. So if you can produce 10, 20 times more lines of code now, then the traditional code review tactics don't work anymore. So what a lot of our portfolio companies do, for example, is they're all like using AI tactics to generate all their code, 100% of it. And then they have AIs that review the code and do self-play. And then the humans don't actually review the code. It just goes into master, it deploys to production, and then they fail fast. And they'll do like reversion and fail forward via AI systems as well. But the world of reviewing all the assembly, I think, is constricting to like very few projects. And if you find yourself working on like a web app where like every pull request is reviewed just as carefully as it was 2 years ago, then maybe the tactics are evolving.
Yeah, I think right now the volume of PRs we get in the Osquery project is small enough, but I think it's a good caution that we should consider when and if that changes.
Or consider like, are there other ways that you can validate the correctness of the system that allow you to then build tactics and infrastructure for evolving the system such that it maintains compliance with users' expectations while still not having any like human processes slowing down the potential velocity?
Yeah, and it's so hard with Osquery, particularly when you look at our integration tests, for example, where we have all these different things that we cannot do very sophisticated integration tests for because on a CI runner, these things aren't configured.
And there's, I mean,
and it being Mac OS, at least, which is a common case for me, like you can't even configure them on a CI runner because you need to literally get into GUI tools to do it.
Yeah, Osquery is arguably like the worst piece of software for like AI software engineering tactics because it's like so important and like performance critical, and there's so many different platforms, and there's like hundreds of tables which each have all these columns and all these expectations about how like it would take like a ridiculous amount of testing infrastructure to do this effectively. But I think in general that's probably not the case for other projects.
Has anybody created what is it called in AI? A I think Gemini calls them gems, and different tools call them different things, but basically smaller versions of an AI tool that focus on a specific topic. Has anybody created one for Osquery and Osquery tables? Because that's one thing that would really help IT people is like, I don't know all the
handful
tables.
of efforts. I'm not sure any of them are open source.
I met this one guy who it was over a year ago now, and I forget his name and I forget what his business was called, and I feel really bad about it. He like scheduled a call with me and showed me this AI system that he built for generating Osquery SQL, and it was incredible. It was like for sure the coolest integration of like AI plus Osquery that I'd ever seen. And I don't know like what he wound up doing with it, or like what kind of he like hit me up and was like, hey, I have this capability of like taking natural language and like creating operating system instrumentation acquisition with it. Like what do you think I should do with it? We had a bit of a brainstorm about like the EDR industry and stuff like that, but I don't know where he went with it. But that was incredible.
So we've seen, I think I maybe remember that guy, because there was like some guy whose name I don't remember, maybe 2 years ago now even, who was like hanging out on Slack saying some stuff. He seemed smart. And then I also remember more recently than that, a bunch of us got email from a company who like emailed every Osquery contributor and was like, hey, we can automate Osquery generation. I don't remember if any of us ever like went to any of their seminars.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Okay, there was a guy before that, and I don't think they were the same guy.
I did go to one of those seminars, and like while I think the seminar kind of automated email was a bit spammy, like I did like already had a conversation with that guy, and it was cool.
Was it the same guy?
Mm-hmm. I think I'm thinking of the same thing you are. Like there were a set of webinars, and they were demoing this technology, but I'm trying now to look through my email to find it, but I'm struggling. I'll let you know if I find it though. But we should, I mean, yeah, that's a great idea. That's like a super low hanging fruit. It's like an AI tool for operating system instrumentation and like orchestrating Osquery and like being a thought partner that knows all about the different tables on different platforms. Like that would be super cool. I think that's probably like pretty firmly in the realm of like vendors at the moment, but it would be cool if something like that existed in a more open context.
Steve Thompson. I found this in my email.
No, that wasn't the guy that I had met.
Okay, I found the company now. Do they still exist? Yes. So that was the company that spammed a bunch of us with seminars.
Yeah. That was it. So they had pivoted now to like a more general text to SQL capability. It looks like they've been acquired by Salesforce now anyway.
Those were two of the names on that email. It smelled like a text to SQL, and Osquery was like a sub case of it.
Yeah. It was pretty dope though. Like it worked pretty well.
So I've linked the Fleet's query generator. I can't remember what we're doing, but I'm guessing we're sort of putting in the schema along with some other prompting and then sending them off to opening calls. But that would be whatever we're doing would be open source in the Fleet repo, if anyone's curious. I think that we should transition to Philip's question, which is more pressingly related to Osquery, and then if there's more time, I'm happy to keep discussing AI.
Yeah. So this was brought to my attention last week by our end user computing architect. There's a secure boot CA certificate that expires in July time period of 2026. When this occurs, any OS that is using secure boot must have their bootloaders and all that updated with new signatures. are signed by either Microsoft's new CA or a different secure boot CA that's installed and active in the UEFI. If it doesn't, things like booting completely just won't work. As I thought about this, I went, okay, well, this is exactly the kind of thing that we want to look up in Osquery. So one of the things that and I brought it up now because I just, I found out about it in Pat's. I had more discussion on Monday. The question that I have is, I know that we can check secure boot status in Osquery with the table that we've been using, but I don't know how much we can see the certificates that are installed in there, and I don't know if we can check the signature of the bootloader for Linux. But those two things, I think, will be something very relevant in the next 4 to 6 months for potentially every company on the planet to deal with. Because that's one of the things that we're seeing on laptops is we have secure boot enabled, and our aim is to have that on all laptops, of course. Has anybody even heard about this already or started looking at it? Okay.
So what I find myself wondering is, how does this normally get updated?
Firmware updates
So I would,
to the OS potentially by the manufacturer.
yeah, this probably doesn't help much with Linux, but on Windows, I would look at whether there's a way to detect that.
So Windows is relatively easy. There's a registry key. Microsoft is doing a bunch of stuff right now, like in the past 3 months through now, to really improve the ability to detect this. They're putting a registry key in. Linux is where I don't think there's an answer yet, and I haven't seen a lot. There's a good article about this from lwn.net that I'll post in so that people can take a look. And if anybody has thoughts, I wanted to raise it because it's something that's come up, and we're doing investigation right now. But if anybody else sees stuff too, I'd love to hear your thoughts. And I suspect many of you have customers who may, or people that that may be interested in this.
Yeah, I'd definitely be interested in looking into it.
It sounds like it's September 11th, actually.
Okay.
September 11th of 2026. Oh. Yeah.
I don't really have a Linux machine I can test that on, but I just dumped into chat what Gemini suggests. So it may be, when I think about how to expose things inside Osquery or how to detect things, like the first step is always, can I do it from the command line? And then I have to go to, how much of that do I have access to inside Osquery? How much of that is even possible inside Osquery? Do I have to look at the extensions ecosystem? So it's been a while since I've been deep in Linux tables, but I think we do have EFI variables. But then
I'm looking at the secure boot implementation right now, and we're reading Boolean EFI variables in the current implementation.
So we might need to add support for the string ones.
Is the data that we need in there?
I don't know, but I can do more. I'll be doing more investigation on it over the next few weeks and can get more data. And we'll put together how we would do it in a shell script, and then continue to iterate on that and see if we can do it with Osquery.
That's always a good, yeah, like Steph said, that's a great place to start. If we can figure out how to do it with a script, then we can figure out how to do it with either Osquery core, if it's possible, or with an Osquery extension if we need to do things like shell out.
Yeah, so I'm only quoting Gemini, so lots of skepticism here, right?
Yeah.
But its assertion is that you can get the CA database out of the EFI vars. So
I'm going to check.
if we can validate that, then it seems, if we don't already have EFI variables, it doesn't seem wrong to add an EFI variables table. And then, there's a question of, well, how do we, one of the things that we've noticed inside Osquery is there's a lot of things that work on files where sometimes maybe you want to join against them with raw data. So like if you wanted to run data from EFI through a certificate parsing, like I don't think we can do that in Osquery today. So that's something we'd have to think about too.
That first command doesn't return anything. It's command not found, but I'm checking if I am just missing the binary.
I'm looking at the Osquery code, and it looks like there's sys/firmware/EFI /vars. That's probably worth looking at. My VM is spinning up at the moment.
It requires a unique package at minimum, EFI tools at the moment. This is on Ubuntu 24.
Enjoy your skiing, Mike. My hunch is that research is needed here. So if you can figure out how to run it on the command line, and Stefano just dumped a bunch of notes into chat as well.
It's a typo. Obviously, it's firmware. Yeah, so there are the EFI variables. EFI variables are under sys firmware EFI vars. I think you can find that path also in the secure build implementation of Linux. And at least I'm using an Arch Linux, but it has the EFI vars command, and you can again list the variable and also print the content. And the KEK variable has actually a longer name, but I can see it seems to have like certificate-like data inside. So it might be the data, like the signature data. I see Microsoft stuff, so PKI, blah, blah, blah. So
yeah, I'm seeing that as well on Ubuntu 22.
Where did you get EF? Oh, I had a typo. No, I don't. Hold on. Sudo EFI var space -- list.
And on my system, you can actually just cat sys firmware EFI vars, and then I have a /KEK dash a whole bunch of stuff, like a UUID looking.
Yeah. The comment is just the faster way if you have it, but they are under that. They are all on the file system.
Which sounds like it could be even easier to read since it's a binary file. I think the question is what format it's in.
Yeah, I can't tell immediately, but yeah, well, like when I run strings on that, I see like some Microsoft stuff.
Yep. This looks like it. Microsoft Corporation Keck CA 2011. Okay. So if nothing else, there might be a way to read that if we can figure out what format it's in. Using the file thing, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine.
Try just throwing an open SSL at it. We are about at time for Osquery office hours. Not that anyone has to leave or anything. Philip, it sounds like there's some directions here, whether it
Yeah.
lands shell script or inside Osquery TBD. Doesn't feel wrong either way, honestly.
Yeah.
I am going to bail. You can all keep talking or move this to an issue or Slack.
Alrighty. Yeah,
Thank you all.
we'll create an issue as well once we get a better idea of how this, once we get a little more info on it. Oh,
Yeah, sounds good. Happy to dig into this further. Thanks for
Yeah.
bringing it up.
It might be in the UFI specification somewhere.
yeah.
Yeah, it's certainly not like recognized by the file utility that just calls it data. Well, to imagine it's something relatively standard.
I mean, actually, it seems to be a KEK. Oh, yeah. Okay, so it might be this thing. I obviously landed again on a Arch Linux forum with the steps to create a custom EFI keys. And so basically what you do is create those keys and basically override the content of the KEK, DB, and PK EFI vars. So I think that what you are passing there is actually like the whole key in that container format, the KEK container format. So
Yeah.
not familiar specifically with that, but
Oh, there's a lot of data. With a lot of random GUIDs.
I need
Yeah.
sig list.
Okay. ChatGPT claims I gave it the contents of the file. It claims it's a EFI signature list structure, and it's got DER encoded X509 certificates.
Okay.
EFI signature request. Signature request.
Yeah, that seems to be
And that seems to be documented in here. Oh, I got a slash on it. Mhm.
I mean, there's also this documentation from the kernel and the tool, like that repository should contain the sign EFI sig list command that is used to like create and sign the create the EK file to then substitute into the FFR. So I mean, between the steps, I guess, and well, linked from the Arch Linux forum, the specification, basically, we already have access to OpenSSL. We can interpret those, I guess, the documentation. We have the documentation for the steps to create one and probably, well, also to interpret one.
Yeah, it looks very doable.
Oh, I see. And the EFI readvar comes from these, these EFI tools repository. So that's what the AI originally was pointing to. Let's see if I can.
Do you see any reason why you need to like use some special approach here versus just reading the file?
No. I think that the data is all there. It just needs to be parsed.
Got it.
That tooling.
It's interesting that EFI bar doesn't output in a helpful format.
It's it's a lower level. Yeah, it's a lower level tool.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you install, at least again, the package on Arch Linux is called EFI tools, like the repository name. It gives you, it provides you the EFI-readvar tool. If you just execute it without any other argument, it shows you, like it parses the KK, DB, PK thing and shows you more clearly. So I cannot copy paste on a different laptop. So, but yeah, you can like single hero, size, owner, subject. And so it means that the source code for that tool should have the logic to pass it.
Oh, nice.
So, I mean, that's got, geez, all right, well, that's easy.
Philip, if you want to like lodge a feature request with my team, it's probably I can advocate for taking it on myself to implement it.
Yeah, I'll get some more info. We'll post some additional data, and make sure that we have more data on how this would impact and those kinds of things, so that we have a good detailed summary of why. I think it's
Nice.
beneficial to have that. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah,
Okay.
that would be helpful for sure.
Yeah. Alrighty.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, guys. I'm gonna shut down the recording here.
Alrighty. Thank you very much. Talk to you all later.